Welcome back to Leaning In. I'm Terry Montesi. Today I'm joined by my good friend Steve Rouman, Senior VP of Real Estate at RH and a longtime industry friend. His background spans leadership roles at Amazon, Apple, Gap, and now RH, giving him a rare perspective on the evolution of retail and retail real estate. We'll discuss RH's shift to a luxury lifestyle brand, the strategy behind their immersive galleries, and what's ahead for physical retail. From site selection to AI, Steve brings smart insights shaped by decades on both the tenant and landlord side. Let's get started. Steve, great to have you on the show today. We've known each other a long time, but for those that don't know you, tell us about your background and how you got to your current role at Restoration Hardware.
If I accomplish only one thing today, it's going to get you to say RH instead of Restoration Hardware.
Oh, I knew that was coming.
But I have to tell you, I still make the same mistake as and I also sometimes do it purposely because not everybody still is knows to call it that. But anyway, to answer your question, mine's a pretty simple story. I'm a career-long retail real estate guy. I graduated from college and I moved to Chicago, which was the thing to do back then with, 80% of my graduating class. And that's all Big Ten schools. Everybody kind of goes to Chicago. And I did the same without a job. I just had what was in the trunk of my car and slept on a buddy's couch until I landed a job to pay the rent. And then I tried to figure out what I was going to do. And I decided that it was probably in my best interest to go to law school. And so I started down that path and taking the LSATs and thinking about it. And while I was doing that, I had a friend who was part-timing for a company at the time called JMB Realty. And you'll, of course, remember JMB. They had an opening for a legal assistant in their real estate legal department. And I'm like, well, I needed to work. And I was in what better place at that time, JMB was a giant, and what better place to sort of to land while I think about this law school thing. And so for whatever reason they hired me, I still don't know, other than I will say, Terry, that the general counsel had gone to Michigan, the senior counsel had gone to Michigan, two of the other lawyers in the department had gone to Michigan. I think that's what got me in the door.
Go Big Blue.
Go Big Blue. Yeah, being my alma mater. So anyway, I land this job as a legal assistant, and I am going to train under one of the senior counsel to negotiate shopping center leases. No idea what that entailed, but anyway, I start down that path, and as I'm doing that, I'm become sort of the liaison between the legal department and the leasing department, and I meet all these guys, and I'm like, wait a second, these guys have company cars and they got nice suits and they got expense accounts and and I'm like, how do I do that? And so I tabled the whole law school thing and made my wishes known. And then I just worked my tail off. And eventually a gentleman you and I both know named Ross Glickman gave me my shot in leasing. And that's where it all started. And so
Rest is history.
Rest is history. Until a pivot, which I'll tell you about. I mean, a shopping center leasing agent for 15 years with JMB Urban through all its iterations. And, Terry, you'll remember when Urban was sold and broken up. And I stayed with one of the acquiring companies, Westfield, for a couple of years after that, but really took that opportunity then to pursue a curiosity of mine, which what would it be like to be on the retailer side? And so in the middle 2000s, I jumped to work for the Gap and running their Chicago real estate office. And the minute I landed in that seat, I was home. And I knew that was the right thing for me. And my career took off as a result. I eventually moved to California. The Gap moved me to California for a bigger job. And I just parlayed my work and that opportunity and experience into bigger and bigger jobs, which eventually landed me at RH.
You've held major leadership roles at Amazon, Apple, Levi's. gap, as you mentioned. Help us understand some of the things you learned at each of those places, or at the major learnings along the way, because there's a lot of variety there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say two things. Number one, I never set out to be the big brand guy. That was more dumb luck than design. And as I look back on that career now, I'm just like, wow, that sort of seems to make people would look at that and sort of that seems to make sense that that's kind of what I've become. But that was never my goal. Just opportunities presented themselves, and when they did, and I I was able to take advantage. But I the second thing I wanted to say is that it's a lot harder to practice real estate for companies whose primary business is something other than real estate. And oftentimes I think I should have stayed on the landlord side. You guys have more fun and make more money, but I do love it. I do love it. I realized early on that I'm much better being sold to than doing the selling. And so I'm happy that I did what I did. But some of the things that I've learned is that now that I've worked for a traditional apparel retailer in Gap, a wholesale apparel company trying to do retail in Levi's, a multi-channel computer and phone company wildly successful at retail, and then an online products distribution company with a very fickle relationship with physical retail and Amazon. All of those have given me a really unique experience on the power of stores, the power of design, the power of online, and the power of brand. I've also learned through that too much process can kill in the real estate world, and especially when that leads to real estate decisions getting too far away from real estate. But I think the biggest impact that all of those experiences and all those companies have had on my approach today is that it's a focus is actually going to sound kind of funny, Terry, because actually to focus less on the real estate itself, because when you work for brands like that, good opportunities come your way, right? You're usually getting shown the best real estate. You don't have to really search far and wide for it, but I focus more on what will that location say about my brand, and what will it say about my company? Can I build what I want to build there? Will the real estate be as impactful to the customer experience or as the product and service themselves? And so that's a lot about how I think about site selection and real estate, and I've learned it from working for those brands.
So how do you describe what RH does and who RH is, and who their customer is?
So I would say, and I know that Gary, our Friedman, our CEO, would like me to say that we are a design firm. Basically, it's really as simple as that. And we choose to show people how we think about design and our ideas about design through the sale of furniture and home furnishings, right? RH's physical locations, first of all, we call them galleries, right? For very specific reasons, and you'll having visited many of them, you'll know that they feel almost museum-like. But RH allows customers to dream what's possible for their personal spaces, right? And who our customer is really anyone buying or selling a home, to be honest with you, although our quality and our price point tends to lean towards a specific demographic. But our RH now, Terry, is more, we are project driven rather than product driven, whereas RH is servicing the customer who is furnishing an entire home or multiple rooms, as opposed to somebody stepping in off the street trying to buy a lamp or a chair.
Great, thanks. You and I have talked about how RH has transformed from a home furnishings retailer into a luxury lifestyle brand. And I use the word luxury because that's something that y'all emphasize. How has that shift changed your real estate strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually, I would tell you there's two shifts, and you and I are of a certain generation to remember these shifts, which is the first shift was from what the original restoration hardware was when it first came out with Steve Gordon, which was actual vintage hardware and fixtures for people renovating their home. And all of the sort of tchotchke novelty items that came along with that, and what those early stores became known for. The first shift was when Gary Friedman came on and changed all of that and started to turn it into a furniture company and a home furnishings company, and got away from that original idea. The second shift came when he started to build big galleries back in 2011, 2012, and 2013, when our first big buildings came online. And so that's a dramatic departure from the types of real estate, from a almost exclusively mall-based company to now, really big, expressive, standalone, multi-level galleries. Because now we just don't do what other retailers do. We have these big gallery locations. We have restaurants, we have hotels, we have luxury jets, we have a yacht. All of these changes have influenced real estate in a very meaningful way. We don't always go where other retailers go. I'm allowed the flexibility to do everything from taking a vacant department store position in a traditional shopping center like we did in Denver with Cherry Creek, to taking an abandoned school for the arts for women in Chicago in a neighborhood, to buying a 50,000 square foot home on a 150 acre parcel in the middle of Indianapolis, and a little bit of everything in between.
And wait a minute, a yacht?
Did you not know about the boat?
No, I didn't.
RH3. We have a yacht available for charter that sails the Mediterranean in the summer and the Caribbean in the winter, all tricked out, completely remodeled by RH, and the boat was just in Monaco for a show, and Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Scarlett Johansson were all on the boat for some period of time. And
Of course they were.
Of course they were, Tara. It's a crazy world, but that's part of my life.
That's great. How big a yacht?
I think it's about 170 feet.
Perfect.
Yeah. Perfect size, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's great. I didn't know that. That's fun to know. From listening to you, I'm not sure that there is a perfect location for an RH, but when you are thinking about finding the perfect location for an RH store or gallery, what are you thinking? What goes into your thinking, and how much of that is influenced by data and driven by data via your info from online sales?
Yeah. Hard question, but I think it really depends, Terry, on if I'm looking to expand an existing location or if I'm going somewhere brand new. Right? If I'm and the beauty of being a company who doesn't have any cash and carry business, right? You can't walk into the gallery and buy something now. Everything is ordered and shipped to your home. So I have the luxury of knowing where everybody lives. And so that makes it really easy for me to figure out if my current locations are already in the right spot, and where I might be able to add a location we're not quite servicing as well as we should. But if I have operating history and I'm in a shopping center that is relevant and powerful, and I never look to leave. I would love to, if the myth still exists, I'd like to dispel the myth that RH is anti-mall. We are not anti-mall. We just happen to build a building that's hard to do inside a mall, right? But I always look to the existing real estate first. And we have examples of that here in our backyard in the village of Corte Madera. We had a small inline gallery, and we went out into the parking lot and built a big multi-level design gallery. We did the same thing in Oak Brook, and we've done the same thing at other places where we've stayed on mall property. We did it in Nashville with Taubman and Cherry Creek and International Plaza in Tampa. We've done that a lot of places, but landlords aren't always able to accommodate that, right? Sometimes there's just not physically able to fit that. And so I will look to go proximate, right? I don't try to ignore real estate fundamentals and try to be a hero, right? I stay proximate to that gravity that's created by the powerful center. But having said that, my brand, the power of my brand and the nature of what we sell does allow me some license to go a bit off pitch if I want to. But if I'm going to do that, then I'm looking for other things. And in addition to retail, I would want to be, hotels, luxury boutique hotels, art galleries, museums, design firms, architectural firms, things that my customer would be inclined to do when they weren't shopping. I try to be around an aggregation of those types of uses if I'm not going to be in the primary retail node. And then if I'm looking to go somewhere brand new, then it's really just how much of a bet do I want to place? But I would typically then go back to sort of real estate fundamentals about visibility and access and some meaningful retail co-tenancy. But there isn't a script, buddy. There isn't a script. Yeah.
Just trying to help my audience learn.
Yeah. Well, I can just give you a quick example. So we're opening a new market in July. We're going to Montreal in Quebec. We've never been there before. And we have 4 existing galleries in Canada, but we've never been on the East Coast like that. And it was just much easier to place a safer bet and go to a brand new luxury shopping center called Royal Mount that just recently grand opened, and we're about to open. But conversely, we bought 70 acres in the English countryside and converted a 17th century grade 1 listed historic estate into a gallery, museum, library with 3 restaurants. And that is nothing to do with real estate fundamentals. That was all about making a brand statement.
Super interesting. Well, watching you and Gary make some of these bets and do some of this really creative, really brand work, real estate work combination has been really interesting. Hey, but my next question I've been wanting to ask, what are a couple of the biggest surprises in your retail site selection career? And what do you mean, Terry? Like maybe one thing I really didn't think it would work, but for some reason I did it, and it did, or man, I thought it was going to be killer, and what a surprise! Give us some surprises, and it's your whole career. It doesn't have to just be.
Yeah. No. Yeah, no. You know what? I actually have to tell you, I agonized over this question the most because you sent me a few of these in advance, and I'm like, what does he mean by that? Isn't
that a fun question though?
It is a fun question because I went super technical on that, and I was going to go into this whole big talk about, oh gosh, I just think my surprises are about how cities are so averse to development and the problems we had with municipalities and planning.
No,
and I'm like,
I'm too abstract of a thinker.
I love what you just said. I will tell one thing that comes to mind almost immediately, and then I can think about some other experiences from past companies. But RH has never had a presence in Palm Desert, California. But it had always sort of been on the list. But it's not a huge market, and we're never really quite sure what to build there. Well, here comes COVID, and places like Palm Desert explode, right? People their second homes became their first homes became their second homes, people bought second homes, people moved and stayed, that whole narrative.
They learned they could work and
Right.
plague at the same time.
And so I'm like, okay, so Palm Desert seems like more fertile ground now than ever. So I went down there and I didn't even really know what I was looking for. And I come across an opportunity. There's a Lululemon store, small Lululemon store on the corner of Main, sort of Main and Main on El Paseo, right across from Taubman's Center. And Lululemon was in the process of moving across the street to expand, and they were insistent on hanging on to their building because they didn't want the landlord to put in a competitor. So they were in the process of subleasing it. Well, along comes Steve Rouman and Terry, with our networks. Who do I call? I call my friend Jenny Chang, and I said, "Tell me about your building." Well, Terry, it was 3,100 square feet.
You've mentioned that to me.
We don't have anything like that, right? And it's fan shaped, but in that weird fan shape, there was symmetry. And I took a flyer and I sent it to Gary, and I'm like, this is, I could either lose my job or you'll elevate me or something in between. I don't know what's going to happen, but he liked it. We did the deal. We made it our first ever RH interior design studio, and it's on track to do somewhere around $2,000 a foot in a small building that has no furniture in it. That's a surprise.
Right? That's a positive surprise.
That's a positive surprise. So it's things like that are not only make our brand unique, but as a real estate person, it's both validation of an idea and makes you think differently about what's possible.
Yeah. How about any negative surprises? Man, I thought this was going to work and it just didn't at any of your brands. I'm sure you've had some of those.
Yeah. Well, there's the sort of typical stock answer of overexpansion, right? Where one store too many, one store too far. A lot of that, happened at the Gap, along with a lot of other companies where you want to keep growing and you sort of test the limits of a brand. And so I did a couple of small market Old Navy stores that I probably would have called a do-over if I could have back in my time there. But just a pure full out unmitigated disaster. I'll have to say I don't have any of those to my name, thank God.
But you've got some disappointments that were surprises though. Man, I
There's
thought
some
that was going to work.
There's some disappointments. Yeah, I think one thing I'll say maybe is that I've learned, and we're learning now, that the one size fits all mentality just doesn't work, especially for what we do, right? If we probably wouldn't have built as much square footage in some markets that we're currently in. Not that they're not profitable stores. That's not really the point. But we did when we were doing some of these early on, we just said, hey, here's our prototype. Let's just drop it here. And we probably are overextended on square footage in some markets that don't really need it, and the buildings could be more productive, but they're profitable. And
I think for the audience purpose, you're thinking when we decided we're going to do galleries, we thought we couldn't. They all had to be big, and now you're learning you can be 3,000 feet, you can be 60,000 feet, and you really need to tailor everything. And, I think that's a great lesson for retailing in general. From my perspective, as I've watched, I think the smartest real estate plays that retailers have made have been in periods where they were just all about dialing in the store size to the market, to the center, to the customer. If they have other stores in the market, they do smaller. If they're only going to do one, they do more flagship. I think that more flexible mentality, in my view, has been the most successful sort of approach, if you will.
look, I totally I completely agree with you. And I think that's the other advantage that RH has over other retail companies, particularly in the apparel space. Terry, as you know, once you start to get to scale, you're looking for speed and for efficiency and consistency, you make it programmatic, right? And for good reasons, right? For economies of scale and cost efficiency and things of that nature. But if you have the sort of intestinal fortitude to push back on whatever it is, leadership pressure or shareholder pressure or whatever, to just say, you know what, no, it's not the right thing to do, and we'll be better for it in the long run, is to size our galleries or stores to the opportunity, to the market. It's no different from you. Like, you have to be very particular about a trademark, how much square footage you're going to build, how much square footage you're going to add, how much, what you're going to fill it with. You're not going to build, a 1.1 million square foot shopping center in every market that you look at. It's the same thing for a retailer.
Yeah, so RH currently has 68 galleries, unless there's been any open in the last week or two, one design studio, a guest house, 40 outlets, a yacht, a jet, and across 61 markets, now international. I know you're in Canada and England. What do you see as the sort of ultimate growth potential? And then where do you see the brand going? And I have to ask a personal question, and that is, what on earth has been, I've told you I've been to Colorado a lot and seen this hole in Aspen for a number of years, and I hear all these rumors. So what in the heck's going to happen in Aspen? Where do you see the business going over the next 10 years? Just use as imaginative and innovative as you could be, because Gary will be trying to out think anything that you or I could up with for sure.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, it would be silly for me to try to speculate what he's thinking. But I would make a couple of general statements, and then I'll address your question about Aspen.
Yeah, that's more of a fun little side note.
Yeah, I think, and I mentioned this before, and I mentioned it a lot to people. I think, Terry, in a post-COVID consumer environment, people, especially our core clientele, prefers to shop more locally. Think, closer to home, right? They're in their home more. They're not commuting necessarily anymore. They're picking the community that they want to be in now, right? Because they can, right? Because you're not tethered to an office or what have you. And that might change a little bit, but I don't think it's ever going to swing back to what it was before. So people are just around where they live more. And I view RH under that context to be understored with 68. Like, what other major national retailer do you know that has less than 70 stores? Like, not many, right? So this is how we learn and adapt and evolve, is that because this is different thinking than what Gary, his original thesis 10 years ago was like, hey, build a big one and they'll just drive to me. People only shop for furniture every 5 to 7 to 10 years, right? And it's a purpose-driven, intent-driven trip. But we also recognize that familiarity, visibility, frequency, and more customer interaction is important. And so I feel we have tremendous opportunity with not just with the Palm Deserts of the world, Terry, but you and I have talked about this before. I don't really think anybody, including Gary, really believes that one gallery on Knox Street services the entire DFW Metroplex. Like, there's just no way that you could come to that reasonable conclusion, especially as a real estate professional. So I feel tremendous opportunity to do infill in the markets where we've already built the big solution. And whether that's going to Fort Worth, whether that's going back to Plano, whether that's going even further north, whatever the case may be. And that's just one market where I could list off, a half dozen. So I think we're very understored, and I think you're going to see a lot more galleries out of RH in the coming years. I think you're going to see a lot of varying sizes. I think you're already going to start to see sub concepts being pulled out of the gallery. We converted our first store in Greenwich, Connecticut. We have our first standalone RH outdoor furniture gallery. We're opening our second RH outdoor furniture gallery in East Hampton, which will live almost side by side to our current indoor interiors gallery, just 2 storefronts away. I think you'll see a continuation of that. I think you're going to see the continuation of new concepts, either through bred here in Corte Madera or by acquisition, and those rolling into stores. We opened our very first Waterworks showroom. We own the company Waterworks. We opened our first Waterworks showroom inside our Newport Beach gallery. We have a small Waterworks showroom in our Palm Desert interior design studio. You could see more of that. You could see more collaboration, more partnerships, more offshoots. I just feel like we've got tremendous runway for growth, being closer to the customer.
And we've talked about it, you still have some fairly large markets in this country that y'all don't have any stores in, right?
Those are lesser now. I'm sort of slowly ticking those off. They're really the only U.S. Well, there's a lot of markets where there's a lot of states where we just don't have a presence at all. But I've addressed Naples. We're soon to be under construction in Naples. We've never had a presence there before. I mentioned Montreal earlier. Never had a presence there before. We're building our first ever gallery on Long Island. We haven't had a presence on Long Island. But the one that sort of sticks with me is Hawaii. We haven't cracked the code on Hawaii. Those are fun market tours, so I'll be looking forward to that. But we have a presence virtually everywhere where we want now. We just don't have enough square footage in some of the key markets, and so there are a couple of big markets where I continue to work hard. The big rocks, as we call them, right? The things that really move the needle. Yeah.
Well, this next topic, we get into AI and sort of thinking about the future. And, that's obviously a hot topic. How do you see, and I know Gary recently in his newsletter touched on it, how do you see, the AI and the world of data balancing and combining with the human creativity that Gary champions? And how do you see that unfolding and affecting and impacting y'all's business?
Tara, I wish I was smart enough to speak really intelligently about this topic, but I will tell you, I think it's got massive implications for the real estate industry. Right? And someone's going to figure that out, and people are going to come to you, and they're going to come to me, especially on the landlord side. I think it's got incredible opportunity for how you market a center, for how people can sort of virtually visit a center, think about stores in advance of a physical visit. I think there's lots of applications for AI, and I haven't quite thought that through yet. But I think, and I don't really know what it means for RH, although I will tell you where I think it has almost immediate impact is at the gallery level. When somebody can be in their home and they can talk to ChatGPT and they can say, draw me a kitchen with white Carrara marble countertops and a Wolf range and a Sub-Zero fridge and this color palette with this type of backsplash and this type of stone, and take it into RH and show the designer. And the designer will be like, well, you just did my job for me. I will help you build and furnish that now. Or conversely, coming to RH and RH having a tool that allows the customer to just speak what they want, and in seconds it shows up on the screen. Incredible application for the design community, I think, and I fully believe that we'll be at the forefront of whatever that is. But I also will say in the same breath that our competitive advantage, I believe our competitive advantage in the home furnishing, the furniture space is our people, right? We attract the most talented designers and thinkers around physical space. And the combination of those two would be pretty powerful.
With your background at Amazon and Apple, you really had a front row seat of how e-commerce and physical retail were, battling and then interacting and then evolving and now working together. So just help us understand, what you got to see and how you process that and what you learned and its impact on our industry, et cetera, relative to the dance between e-commerce, physical retail first, then e-commerce came along. It was going to be the death knell, and now they work together beautifully. Give us your observation.
Yeah, well, I'm probably not going to tell you anything that you don't already know, or your audience anything novel about this, but I can affirm a lot of things that people believe to be true. And I don't even need to think about Amazon and Apple necessarily, but I will just say, generally speaking, that the two don't survive without the other, and the two thrive as a result of working in tandem. But I remember, Terry, when I was at Gap Inc. and we made the acquisition of Athleta. And Athleta was a small catalog and online retailer based in Marin that had 0 stores. And we did a test store for them. It's 2,300 square feet. It was in a little highway fronting strip center called Strawberry Village in Mill Valley, California. And it was anchored by Safeway grocery store.
Isn't that where you live?
I live just north of there. Yeah. And there was a smattering of some local restaurants and shops, and successful, but we planted it there, right in Mill Valley, where Athleta was sort of homegrown. And I still remember this, Terry, that Athleta was doing about $500,000 in online business in Marin when we did it, $450,000 to $500,000. And we opened the store, and the store did like $3.5 million out of 2,300 square feet. And the online business doubled. And so that relationship, I think, has borne itself out time and time again across multiple retailers, that all boats rise when you do both, and both suffer when one goes away. And the real trick is, e-com is about speed and selection, right? You sort of convenience, like on an online store, there's nothing, you can see every SKU. There's no curation of product that you can only fit into a 4,000 square foot store. You see everything, right? So online is about speed and selection and execution. Physical stores is about customer engagement, customer experience, and displaying what your brand is about.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'd add to that is an appealing to all the senses, and you just, online is really appealing to your intellect and your sight, but that's it. The others, engaging your senses, like your stores do a great job of that. Yeah, so you've been involved in and been a student of real estate for a long time. What retailers do you think are doing a great job at brick and mortar today? And how do you think things have evolved? What have you seen, some of the big evolutions that you've watched during your career in our industry?
Who's doing it well today? There are a couple that really come to mind. And I will admit to you, there are a lot that I see but know very little about. especially relative to their real estate strategies. But I would highlight Aritzia. I think Karen and Brian Hill have done an amazing job of not only running their business, but staying selective, going slow, being purposeful. I just think that they love the look and feel of their store. Like they're sort of, to me, they're bringing everything together that sort of matters, right? Amazing product, a very distinct point of view, beautiful store environment, great real estate, not doing too much. Like they're just really doing well. And I would also, I tip my head a little bit to Aloe. I know that there's a lot of people in that space now, and they're all great for various reasons. Lulu, having been the undisputed king for a long time. But I think Aloe stores are beautiful. I think they come with a very distinct point of view that's different than everybody else. I really love what they're doing in the bricks and mortar side. I just love the comeback story of Abercrombie and Fitch. I think I think their stores look great, but I also
are they different than they used to be? Golly.
No kidding, right, Tara? That to me that's a lesson for everybody.
And what's the lesson?
You can remake yourself. It's not, that brand was completely different, right? It stood for something different. It was run by different people, and you can take a brand as battered and beaten up as that one and revive it. It's a brilliant comeback story. There's other retailers who should look at that as inspiration for what's possible. I also love what Ed Stack's doing at Dick's Sporting Goods. Here's a guy who already owns the category. He could just sit back and do nothing. But what does he do? He blows it up, and he's doubling down. He's creating bigger, more immersive experiential stores. Vince will tell us, Terry, I'm sure he's told you that Ed said, design me a store that puts my existing store out of business. How great is that? Right? And so here's a guy
that every year.
Yep. Here's a guy who owns the category. He's got no real competition, yet he is evolving and changing himself. I also tip my hat to Costco. Less necessarily about their real estate. Those are just very different types of deals, but just more about, I admire just what they are able to do. They now have created probably one of the single most successful private label brands in our industry, in their Kirkland brand. Their membership model is genius. They too have food in their stores like we do. That's highly curated, and they've managed to maintain a level of aspiration that you don't see in a sort of wholesale, value proposition. So I have a great deal of respect for them. And Trader Joe's is another one that comes to mind, I think, in the specialty grocery space. Another company that doesn't try to do too much, stays true to who they are, knows their customer. And then I would say the Sam Fox Restaurant Group. I just think any landlord who's not talking to them should be. And there's a guy he's a tastemaker, like we believe ourselves to be. He's a great concept developer, and I think a real add to any retail project. And then some of these other guys we talked about, like I think Arc'teryx is cool, On Running is cool, Veronica Beer, Jenny Kane. Like there's a lot of them who I don't know much about relative to how they think about real estate. There's just this whole cadre of emerging and even more established brands that are doing cool things.
Well, it sounds like you're pretty optimistic about our industry. And my next question is thinking about looking the next 5 to 10 years. What are some of the things you see unfolding in retail and retail real estate?
So I am maybe, Terry, maybe this is, people might accuse me or you or just being too old school about the whole thing. But when you work for a brand as dedicated to the physical space as we are, and who has seen the success in physical retailing like we have, there's just no way it's going to diminish. There's just no way it's going away. I think as technology advances at a pace that you and I can only imagine, right? It's just a freight train of where we are technologically as a society from even where we were 10 years ago, certainly 15 or 20 years ago. And so that's not going to stop. The pace of technological change is going to be incredible. But I view it, Terry, as this amazing tension point and contradiction where the more you can have access and tools to technology that lead you away from personal interaction, the more powerful personal interaction becomes. It's just right. It's this weird thing that having compelling physical spaces for people to congregate, whether they be shopping centers, stores, whatever, is just going to be more, it's just going to continue to get more meaningful, right? It can't, there's no way I just don't see any other way around it. And companies who are thoughtful about what they provide for their customers to step into are going to win, and then 5 to 10 years, I mean, will there be a department store left standing? I don't know. Maybe one or two, and they'll certainly be their fleets will be a lot smaller if they're even around. And I go back to what I said earlier about the continual development and redevelopment of localized retail. Really cool neighborhood centers, really, the sort of Marin Country Mart model of the world, right? Or even things that you've done, in Fort Worth and other places, small, bespoke, mixed use, like that's the future.
Yeah. So along those lines, any other projects around the country, retail places that you think have done a great job creating a compelling place for people?
Yeah, I thought long and hard about this. First of all, the powerhouse traditional enclosed regional malls have stayed that way and actually excelled. And most of the ones that I think about, Terry, that fall into that category are privately held. North Park, South Coast Plaza,
Aventura,
right? So those you cannot help but admire and tip your hat to how those projects have stayed relevant.
You're right. Bellevue. I mean, you're right.
Bellevue Square with Kemper.
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like those are, whatever word you want to use, fortress assets.
What about your favorite outdoor projects?
My favorite outdoor stuff, I think U Village in Seattle is best in class. I love Avalon and Ponce City Market in Atlanta. I'm a huge fan of La Cantera in San Antonio. I've always have been. Oak Brook, my hometown favorite from Chicago, has done a great job. Stanford Shopping Center in Palo Alto is a beautiful showcase. Americana Manhasset on Long Island, where I'll be opening a store. That's basically a luxury strip center, for God's sakes. It's just incredible what the Castagna family's done there. The streets at Chestnut Hill by WS in suburban Boston. I love Legacy West in Plano, right? UTC in San Diego, and then this little project in Del Mar called One Paseo, which I think is super cool. Those are some of my favorites.
Thanks. Well, we're running out of time, and I thought to finish up, if you have one big bit of advice for someone thinking about getting into retail real estate.
Well, I tried to think about how I could answer this, you know, in a less than, sort of boring and a more remarkable way. But and this may also make it sound like I'm going old school, but you gotta like people to be in
Yeah.
to be in our business. And I would tell young people, because my two youngest boys are thinking about it now, and they see me, they're now getting exposed to the industry, and the the power of human connection is on full display in retail real estate. My network tear is my currency, right? My my friendships, my relationships, my partnerships have saved my ass more than once, in my career. And I I feel like if that's what if that's what you're looking for, if having meaningful dialogue and negotiating and persuading people and forming relationships that last for decades. Like I don't know another business. I'm sure there are other businesses that are like ours. I don't know many though. I mean, I just think it's the power of personal connection and the power of people is what this industry is all about. And this past ICSC, I was I don't know why it just struck me, Tara, because I was completely energized by the whole thing. And maybe that's just because of my age, right? Like now I just happen to know a lot of people just
I
because I've
felt
been around,
I felt the
right?
same way. It's like it was way easier than it's been in the past, you know?
It was way easier, but but meeting young people and two is just it's energizing. It's a great business for young people who want that type of experience. And I would encourage anybody in the business, getting into the business, to be present at those things, to visit retailers in their offices, to see competing projects, to learn, to understand. Like it's a tactile industry. It's a tactile industry.
And I
Yeah.
need to let our audience know that if you hadn't said what you said, I was going to say it for you because you are one of the best in the industry at building personal connection. And you alluded to it a second ago without getting into it. You and I, we see each other, and our mantra is life's too short to have shallow conversations, and so we've become friends through work. And like you said, a lot of people think of work, I don't want to work. Why would I work? I can't wait to not work. And to me, work has been, and you, extraordinarily rewarding, and the relationships are the big chunk of the reward. And kudos to you. That you're right, it is your currency. One last question: is there anything you'd like to ask me?
There's a lot of things I'd like to ask you, buddy, but I guess I'm thinking about it. If I turn around and I'm interviewing you, your origin story, I'm not sure you've ever told me how you got into this business, and give me some of your proudest moments along the way.
Yeah, well, my origin story, I give to my ancestors. My grandfather, Fred Montesi, came over on a boat from Italy when he was, I think, 8. And he ended up starting a small grocery store in Memphis, Tennessee. And, was a hardworking guy, sixth grade educated, and ended up selling that, or built some stores, sold them, and then came back and built the market dominant retail grocer in Memphis, then expanded to St. Louis and Birmingham. So I grew up in the retail business, watching my dad and my uncle his twin brother run a small grocery chain that had the largest market share in Memphis. We were the big guy in Memphis for years and years until they sold out in '84. So that's where I got into retail, and then got out of college. And a few years after working in real estate, my brother and I became Blockbuster Video's fourth franchisee.
No kidding.
Yeah, so we raised the money and became the franchisee, and I was a retailer and I was, what my big active contribution was I did the real estate. And so I used to do retail real estate for blockbuster franchises. And, between growing up around the grocery stores and watching my dad pick sites and then doing blockbuster real estate, it was in my blood, and just kept going from there, and started Trademark when I was 34 years ago now, when I was 31, 32 years old, and never looked back.
Well, I'm not surprised at all now to hear that you were a retailer, because I've been on both sides and you have, and it just gives you a whole different perspective. You can understand better.
Empathy.
And you don't, you don't always agree, but you understand, and you get immediate street cred. Like when somebody knows, hey, I did what you did. I did what you did for a long time. I can call David Pratt's bullshit in like the first 20 seconds. Right. And he knows it. And right. Exactly. And so it just creates this. Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story. Let's take me one real quick from Trademark forward, proudest moment.
Oh, golly. That's so hard.
I know.
I think it's probably, and I'm a little irritated with you because you didn't mention Market Street Woodlands as one of your favorite projects.
Well, because you won't let me in there yet.
Well, so, I'll try. I hope my subconscious doesn't hold that against you. But, it's probably pulling that off. I closed that land out of pocket without any leases signed, took a crazy amount of risk as a fairly young person, because it's been 20 years ago. And then, grand opening that, and just continuing to participate in the ongoing success and its real impact on that community. It is the heart and soul of the Woodlands, which is one of the great, suburban places to live in this country. So I think it'd probably have to be that. Thanks for asking.
No, I'm not just saying this because you brought it up. I love that project. I always have been trying to do something there for a long time. I think you and I have a line of sight to maybe doing something, but that again speaks to amazing foresight by you, a little bit of risk, but that comes from both a gut feel and experience, and recognizing that a market is not served by one type of asset, right? There's just opportunity. Yeah. And then that's been replicated across the country. And I'm sure, no doubt, because of people who have studied what you did. Yeah.
Thanks
that's
for
a
those
great,
nice words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's been a blast getting to talk to you and hang out with you for this last hour, Steve. I'm super grateful for your time and for your friendship, and hope you have a great day.
Right back at you, brother. I'll see you soon.
Steve, thanks so much for joining me today and sharing your unique perspective on RH's evolution, the power of place, the future of our industry, and what young folks ought to be focused on if they're interested. From immersive experiences to international expansion, your insights offer a compelling look at where retail is heading and how thoughtful real estate strategies can shape brand identity. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and follow us on LinkedIn for more episodes of Leaning In. Until next time, I'm Terry Montesi. Thanks for listening.